Thank you very much for being on the programme. It really feels like you were the perfect person to speak to today because you've got the political experience, you were Defence Secretary under Blair, you're a former Secretary General at NATO, and of course you wrote what has been described as the most radical blueprint for the military for a generation as well. My first question is about this report today that NATO wants the UK to spend 3.5% of GDP on defence within 10 years, obviously more than what the government has been talking about. Should we meet that requirement?
Well, that's an aspiration. And I was into aspirations when I was Secretary General as well. When I went to NATO, I said I had three priorities. One was capabilities, two was capabilities, three was capabilities, because that's what NATO is about. So, so Secretary General Rutte is saying we should ideally be spending 3.5%. Half the countries don't even spend the 2%, which was laid down at the Wales summit 11 years ago. So, the idea of 3.5%, I think, is a little bit beyond what people are capable of doing. And in any event, we should be focusing on what the money is being spent on rather than on the quantity of money itself. It's capabilities, readiness and equipment, and these are the things that Secretary General Stoltenberg said were better measures than simply GNP. So I think 3.5%, I think is beyond Italy, Spain, Portugal, who are all under 2% at the present moment. Canada, which is on 1.1%.
So it's unrealistic.
It's got to be.
That's what you're saying.
There's a degree of unrealism about it, which encourages people, to fake the figures. But I think that the main priority is that NATO and SACEUR, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, has the capabilities in order to be able to deter any aggressor.
So in other words, Keir Starmer shouldn't even bother trying to get to 3.5 because it's not really a realistic ask.
Well, it's up to the Prime Minister to round the table. The decision will be taken by consensus, unanimously. So he'll have his voice to play. Other people will do that as well. And we'll see whether 3.5% becomes the target and whether SACEUR believes that that is absolutely essential. That is the way that the thing is actually determined. But what we're promising here is 2.5% the year after next and 3% at the beginning of the next Parliament. The benchmark for the review was 3% by 2035. The Prime Minister has promised we'll get there. The commitment was there. The Defence Secretary made the plain last night that the review will be financed, and that's good for me.
Do you think that we'd even be talking about it in this way if it wasn't for Donald Trump?
I think Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin put an accelerator onto defence expenditure and defence capabilities in Europe. There's no doubt about that. But the Europeans, I think, the non-US allies, including Canada, woke up to the fact that what happened in Ukraine meant if they were going to keep their people safe, they clearly had to do more in their own interest. So it's a question about satisfying Donald Trump, being alert to what Vladimir Putin is doing, but also a recognition that defence is the ultimate insurance policy. And you've got to pay a premium for your insurance. Now, maybe that involves persuading the people, that they need to spend more on defence, or else the consequences could be grave. So in our review, we say, and the government has accepted, to have a national conversation with the people of this country to say, if you want to be safe, if you want your kids and their kids to be safe, the insurance premium has to be paid just like your premium on your home insurance.
You say that about wanting to be safe. It feels like it can feel like we are quite safe here, that Russia is an awfully long way away. Ukraine, Poland, that spends a lot of money on defence, these are all countries that are far closer to Russia. Is this just, the same old military bosses banging the drum for more money?
But it's not true. There were people in Mariupol and Bucha and Zaporizhzhia in Ukraine. And I remember I used to visit these places, who walked in the streets as safely as we can walk away from the studio tonight, who felt safe and felt fine. And then suddenly the invasion took place, and they're being brutally suppressed and oppressed by the Russian Federation today. So that's one side of the coin, that there is a potential for that to take place, even if you think you're secure. The other side of the coin is that we're under attack at the moment. You have 90,000 cyber attacks every day. 97% of the data that we use, that will be used for this television programme, comes in undersea cables. Something like 77% of our gas supplies for this country, i.e. keeps the lights and the heating on, comes in one pipeline from Norway. So we've seen what happened in Spain and Portugal when the lights went out. We saw what happened to Heathrow Airport when one of its transformers blew up. We're seeing what happens in the Baltic Sea when these alleged merchant ships drag their anchors across the cables. So the war is already on, but the next war is going to be very, very big and nasty.
It's a question, as you say, about what we're spending the money on, but it is also a question of money as well. And Rachel Reeves is looking ahead to a very difficult settlement on things like prisons that are full, on things like hospitals, schools, councils that are struggling. Do you feel sorry for her?
Yeah, it's a grim job being Chancellor, and I spoke to her a couple of weeks ago. I was actually moaning to her about holding up my review.
What did you say to her?
I said, why are you holding up my review?
What did she say?
And she said, we're not holding up your review. We just want to get it right. So fine. And
did she put pressure on you?
She's a good person. Yeah, she wanted the ends tidied up. Fine. That's the process of government as well. And we've got the report out now.
What does that mean, the ends tidied up?
Well, I think there were some detail. There's a sort of, what about if this happens? What about if that happens? What will it cost? So making sure that we were within it. So the Prime Minister yesterday and the Defence Secretary last night made it clear that the money will be provided to execute the 62 recommendations that are in the report, all of which have been accepted by the government. But I don't envy the task that Rachel Reeves has got. This is really difficult, but I think she's got in her mind the very fact that people need to be protected, need to be safe.
Do you think we should do what Germany's done and have this surge in borrowing in order to rearm ourselves to meet the need?
Well, I'm deliberately not, after the review's been published, wandering into the territory of what to do. The country itself has got to make a decision about how safe it wants to be and how secure it has to be. And that may mean that within the budget as a whole, there will have to be prioritisation or reprioritisation in order to get there. Now, that may mean eventually more taxes or specific taxes, as there is in Germany. That's a decision that will be taken by the Prime Minister and by the Chancellor. But we need to build a consensus in the country that defence matters, that it's urgent, and that if you want to be protected, you have to pay that insurance premium that is the defence budget.
Just finally, you have spent an awful lot of months kind of agonising over this. It must be quite a responsibility, right? If you know how important this is. What do you want people to take from the review that you've co-authored?
Well, the report is about how we reorganise defence, transform defence, a new National Armaments Director, new procurement processes, grabbing the best of technology, the most innovative technology, learning the lessons of Ukraine, and seeing how the Ministry of Defence can be reorganised so that every pound that is spent on defence is actually spent on defending the country. So that's what we did. We've spent 10 months looking at everything in enormous detail, every aspect of defence, scrubbed and researched and consulted on. So this report is a template. I hope other countries are going to read it and are going to like it and may well adopt the recommendations that are there. So if at the end of the day we've persuaded people that more needs to be done to make the country safe, then we'll have succeeded.